If you like the idea of having a traditional English cream tea, center to that are scones. And they're really great, and they have two advantages. First of all, they taste good, and that's a pretty obvious one. The other advantage is they're real easy to make. I've been asked to share my recipe, so this week we're going to do that. Stay tuned. So to begin with, we have our ingredients. Now, this is the correct amount for 4 scones. We have 200 grams of self-raising flour, 100 ml of milk. We have 50 grams of diced butter. Then we have 2 heaped or 4 level teaspoons of baking powder, just under half a teaspoon of salt, and again 2 heaped teaspoons or 4 level teaspoons of sweetener. That could be sugar, or it can be something like Splenda, which is what we're using here. If you are using sugar, I would recommend icing sugar because it will dissolve into everything much easier. Now, this basically means that you're using 50 grams of flour per scone. And you divide that in half for the liquid. So for here we have 200 grams. If we were making a dozen scones, we would triple this. So here we're using 200 because we're making 4. If I was making 12, I'd be using 600 grams of flour to 300 ml of milk to 150 grams of diced butter. I don't like making that sort of quantity unless I have guests because, to be honest, I prefer my scones to be as fresh as possible. And they are fresher when you make smaller batches, and they're real easy to make. So again, 200 grams, 100 ml, 50 grams, 2 rounded teaspoons, just under half a teaspoon of the self-raising flour, the milk, the butter, baking powder, sweetener, in this case Splenda, or it could be icing sugar, and salt. Step 1, of course, is we take all the dry ingredients and put them together. This will be followed by pouring all the dry ingredients through a sieve because we want to get rid of all the lumps and clumps and help it to mix better. And it really is quite simple to get it all through. And this way we get all the unwanted lumps out, and we have quite a smooth mixture. At this point, we want to add the butter. And having added the butter to the flour, we now need to rub that together. This is like making pastry. And what you have when you start rubbing it together is something that's quite squishy. This process for this quantity, I have to tell you, only takes, well, it usually takes me about a minute, maybe 2 minutes, somewhere between a minute and 2 minutes. It's not a long process. And when we squeeze all these together, we start forming little clumps. We have 2 things here. We have lumps and we have clumps. Now, if you squeeze it and it's a bit squishy, it's probably a lump of butter. But as you're blending this together, you get bits of the flour with the butter mixed in with it and so forth, clumping. Clumps we don't care about. They're fine. They're not important. What we're concerned with is not getting lots of lumps. We want to clumps, we don't care. That's fine. And basically when you feel them, if they just simply disintegrate on you, it's because it's a clump, and that, again, it doesn't matter. Now, at this point, It's done. There is no, I'm feeling around for lumps and there aren't any left. All the butter is now incorporated into this flour. It's changed color slightly. It has a yellowish tinge, which comes from the butter, and it's quite crumbly. And this is exactly what we want in time for the next stage. So now we add our final ingredient, the milk. And the milk is then stirred in with a fork. And as you stir, the milk will get incorporated as well. And it will suddenly start appearing lumpier and lumpier until all the lumps and clumps seem to stick together to form something of a dough. As you can see, you need what, half a minute, something like this, and it's now very doughy. What I don't want to do particularly is knead this. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of flour just on the top of that so that I can handle this without it getting too sticky. And I'm going to put a little bit of flour on my hands. And I'm just a little more flour on the underside, just to dry it off enough so I can handle it. I'm not really looking to knead this, just really compress it together into a nice soft ball. And this is now ready for the next step. Adding a little bit of flour to our board so we don't have too much problems with things sticking. We take our ball of dough, which is pressed together a little bit, and then we take a knife and just cut it into 4 pieces of approximately equal size. And each one of these is then shaped into a round ball. Doesn't matter if you have a few cracks on the surface. That's not going to hurt it in the least. Now, you'll notice I'm not using a round cutter. I find them unnecessary and unhelpful. And you'll notice I'm only squeezing these very gently to get the shape. I'm not actually squeezing hard to knead them because I want them to remain soft. And these are now going to be transferred onto the parchment paper. So if I move that a little bit over, and we have our baking tray with parchment paper, and I'm just going to put these on. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press each one flat and squeeze it round. I want them to be just under an inch tall, which is about 2 centimeters, and about 2 inches wide, which is about 5 centimeters. But otherwise just round and flattened, almost like a burger. And you can do it in your hands to get a more patty-like shape, but you want the sides, ideally at this stage, to be comparatively straight-sided and otherwise just round. Again, you'll see some little cracks on the surface of this. It doesn't matter. It adds character to the final product. A lot of people have them very close together, even touching, which we can do. I don't usually do it. I like it to have a little bit more freeform, so I've got them a bit more spread out. Finally, the next step is to brush them with a bit of milk. Finally, I'm going to brush the top of each one generously with a bit of milk. We don't have to go crazy, but you want it definitely a nice coating of milk. Doesn't matter if a little bit drips down the side, as long as the top is nicely coated, because this will help them to brown rather nicely on the top without burning when it's in the oven. Now, for the oven temperature, we want 200 degrees Celsius, and we want them in there for 15 minutes. And right now the oven is heating up. So what we're going to be doing is allowing these to rest for a couple of minutes while the oven's heating up. Really 5 minutes is sufficient for resting. Some people rest them longer, some people don't bother resting them at all. I usually rest them while the oven finishes. I switch the oven on when I start, and by the time the oven is up to temperature, these have been put together and have had 5 minutes to rest. It seems to work well. So into the oven, 200 Celsius, which is about 400 Fahrenheit, for 15 minutes, and then we'll be good to go. So it's been 15 minutes, and time to remove them from the oven. And we now take the scones and put them on a rack to cool. Once cooled down, they are ready to serve. And so now we are ready for a proper cream tea, which of course starts with a cup of tea, a scone, which we'll cut open. Now there is some controversy, as many of you will know, as to the best way of putting jam and cream onto a scone. Now for those who know, there's basically the Cornish way and the Devon way. Now in Cornwall, they'll start off with the jam and put that on first. On the other hand, in Devon, the traditional way would be to take the clotted cream and put that on first, with the jam going on second, which is the exact opposite of the Cornish way. Now, there is a big controversy in Britain over which is the best way to do this, at least in some quarters. I, of course, being a barbaric savage, split the difference. Anyway, I hope you found that interesting. If you enjoyed this video, do please share, like it if you liked it, and consider subscribing. Also, if you have an opinion on the best way to put your cream and jam onto your scone, please let me know in the comments. And we hope to see you again soon. Have a good one.